Is Baltimore Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson in for his best season yet after his body transformation? We talk about that and so much more coming up next during today's episode of Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, your daily NFL podcast. I'm Kevin Oestreicher. I'm the host of Locked On Ravens and one of the many NFL experts here on our network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On NFL a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. So be sure to, again, subscribe, follow along, like the video if you're in video form, and follow along if you are in audio form. Today's episode of Locked On NFL is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet to $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are back here in the midst of OTAs for a lot of teams right now, as they're either entering their second, their third week of OTAs. So there's a lot to talk about storyline-wise, but we're going to get into a bunch of different types of storylines today. First, we're going to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens. Me being the host of Locked On Ravens, I'll take you through that in the first part of the show, talking about Lamar Jackson's body transformation and if he's in store for maybe his best season as an NFL quarterback. So we'll talk about that in the first part of the show. Then we'll move on to Tampa Bay with James Yarcho of Locked On Buccaneers. Antoine Winfield Jr. got extended last week. Didn't have a chance to talk about it on last week's episode of Locked On NFL, so I wanted to dive into that a little bit with James today. Then finally, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants will join us. There has been some speculation about Daniel Jones and if he is on track to start in week one. Daniel Jones saying some stuff himself, so we'll talk about that with Patricia in the final part of the show. So let's get into it. Biggest storylines of the week here. And I think for a lot of people, Lamar Jackson's body transformation was that. We've been talking about that a lot here in Baltimore over the last couple of weeks. And even he did an interview with Complex 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he talked about where his weight is at right now. Now, he went through a huge body transformation a couple of years ago when he bulked up. He said on Complex he was at 230. He was playing at 230 in 2022. Then moved down to about 215 pounds in 2023 last year, and now he's right around 205. Now, during OTAs, his media availability, he wouldn't say what his actual weight was, the actual weight he's playing at, but it seems like he just feels a lot more comfortable in a lesser frame. He said that he's doing it to be more agile, and it felt like, especially towards the end of the year last year, he had some plays where a lot of people were questioning, why wouldn't he just do X or Y or Z? So, for example, in the Asian Championship game, when he caught his own pass off that deflected ball, a lot of people thought, okay, Lamar Jackson, clear lane, he'll score. But Drew Tranquil ended up getting him right as a shoestring tackle, brings him down. But the one that I always go back to in that same game, actually, is when the Ravens had a 4th and 1, 4th and inches, and Lamar runs it right up the middle and takes it to the right sideline. And usually we see Lamar Jackson just bolt and beat a guy down that sideline, and it's no problem. But it didn't feel like he had confidence in his body and in his speed, so he tried to back juke Snead, and it didn't work. They picked up the first down, obviously, and a bunch of yards after, but in a game like that, you need to be able to trust your body, and it feels like Lamar just feels more confident in, just playing at a lesser weight. And I think that we've seen Lamar. I mean, a lot of people are saying, well, he won an MVP last year at a heavier weight. And well, he also won it, if we remember, in 2019. And that was when he was still kind of the slender Lamar Jackson. Came into the league. Everybody knew in 2018 as a rookie, he had to put on more weight. He did that, but he didn't really bulk up until 2021-ish, 2022 was really where he put that all together. But it's not like Lamar Jackson wasn't fast or wasn't agile, right? Even though he was a little bit heavier, playing at a bit of a heavier weight, he still had that electricity element to him, the acceleration. It just wasn't classic Lamar Jackson, I guess. So when we're asking, is Lamar going to have his best year this year? I mean, we're talking about a 2-time MVP. I mentioned once in 2019, and obviously he's the reigning MVP, winning again in 2023. But, You combine who Lamar was as a younger player, that body, that speed, that acceleration, that agility, and you put it with his mind now. Lamar during his first couple of seasons, he was feeling things out and he was learning, right? Every quarterback does, every NFL player does. It's not exclusive to Lamar or anything. He was learning the NFL game, certainly solved it pretty quickly during his second season when he won that first MVP. But it just feels like to me, he also has, I think, hopefully one of the better receiving groups around him that he has had in his career. Now, might not be that wide receiver wise. Zay Flowers is obviously there. They're hoping for a big leap from Rashad Bateman. But where I'm going with this is at the tight end position, it's not just the Mark Andrews show anymore. Isaiah Likely is the Ravens' offensive X factor this season. How they use him is going to be key. You talk about Lamar's speed, talk about the acceleration and everything, but the way Lamar's going to have his best season this year, if that's the route he goes, if he does, it's going to be with his arm and with his legs. And part of that is being able to get out of the pocket, do a shifty thing, and punish teams on the ground. But it's also going to be his ability to throw the football. And the Ravens using two tight end sets is going to be a very big part of that, hopefully. Likely has stepped up for Mark Andrews in back-to-back seasons when he's gone down, and both guys have played like tight end ones. We know Andrews is one of the best tight ends in the league. But Isaiah Likely is so up and coming. He's a name that everybody should be watching for the 2024 season. For Lamar, I think there's going to be an added element of the running game, partially because Derrick Henry is also now there. So maybe he feels like, hey, you know what? I bulked up so I could take some more hits and do this and do that. But with Derrick Henry now being that bruiser guy, not that Lamar is ever a quote-unquote bruiser. He wasn't. But it feels like the yin and the yang of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. It's going to be so hard to stop both of those guys with personnel. You're going to have to find a balance if you're an NFL defense. So to me, it feels like there is an opportunity for Lamar to have his best season yet. Does that mean it's going to happen? It's tough. I mean, Lamar's had two incredible MVP years where the bar is already set so high, but we know with Lamar Jackson, he is one of the most polarizing players, if not the most polarizing player in the NFL. And if he's back to feeling as confident as ever in his body, that could be a scary sight for defense. So I'm very curious to see how it all goes for Lamar. But coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be talking a bit more about Antoine Winfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. James Yarcho of Locked On Bucs will join us to talk about that, the Bucs draft, and a lot more. So stay tuned. We have plenty to talk about here on this episode of Locked On NFL. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big one of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So the Ravens, me being the Ravens guy for the Locked On Podcast Network here, Locked On Ravens, got to go to that Week 1 game between Kansas City and Baltimore. It'll be the opening night game for the NFL on Thursday night. The Ravens on FanDuel open that game as 2.5-point underdog. So if you like the Ravens, you like the Chiefs in that game, I'm sure that line will be changing as we get closer to the game. But be sure to go over to FanDuel. Maybe you want to get in on the action right now. So go to FanDuel.com and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday. Really appreciate, again, everybody for making Locked On NFL a part of your day today. Be sure to subscribe and follow along, video form and audio form. Let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now. Antoine Winfield Jr., the Bucs star defensive back, gets extended. We'll talk with James Yarcho of Locked On Bucs about that, the Buccaneers draft, and a lot more now. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers extended a key member of their defense in Antoine Winfield Jr. And here to talk about that with me and more Buccaneers is James Yarcho, the host of Locked On Bucs. And James, there was no way Tampa was letting Antoine Winfield walk out of Tampa Bay. They knew they needed to get him under contract. He's too important to that defense. So the deal comes down. How did you like it for Tampa? Can you kind of go through the specifics of the contract and whether you thought that the deal that Winfield got was an overpay, was it an underpay, or was it just right in what you were expecting?
Yeah, I kind of went into the whole thing expecting Antoine to be up there with Derwin James and Minkah Fitzpatrick in terms of pay, and kind of figured he was going to be the top paid safety. And I actually talked on Locked On Bucs in a prediction, like a contract prediction episode, that the Bucs could make him the highest paid safety, but that could mean a couple of different things. Are we talking highest paid in total guarantees, highest paid in total money, highest paid in average annual value. Well, Jason Light just said, you know what? Highest paid defensive back. Not even just safeties. We're just a straight defensive back. 4 years, 84.1 million with 45 guaranteed. And what's interesting is that 45 is guaranteed in the first 2 years of the contract. So after that, they actually have a little bit of an out. They're not going to want it because Antoine Winfield Jr. had an all-time season. I mean, he did something that no safety, no player in NFL history had ever done, talking about 120 plus tackles, 4 plus forced fumbles, 4 plus fumble recoveries, and 3 plus interceptions. And then I think it was 5 plus sacks all in one season. No one had ever done it. And Antoine did it. So this was a deal that Antoine set himself up for. The Bucs were able to make sure that it happened. He didn't have to play on the franchise contract, but this is a guy that Todd Bowles relies on so much. He plays in so many different spots on this defense. He lines up and he plays free safety. He plays strong safety. He lined up at linebacker. He had snaps at defensive line last year for the Buccaneers. He is the do-it-all guy. And having that player in a defense like the one that Todd Bowles runs is absolutely crucial to any success that they're going to have.
And can you talk a bit about just the outlook of Tampa's secondary right now? Obviously, Winfield is such a big part of that, but Carlton Davis now in Detroit, and you have a couple of other options for how to replace some key members of that secondary. But with Winfield now under contract and that situation resolved, how does the rest of Tampa's secondary look?
Well, they made the other big addition in Jordan Whitehead, right? They got him back after a couple of years in New York. And Jason Light recently just talked on a podcast about how the moment they let Jordan Whitehead leave, he regretted it. And he was so glad that he had an opportunity to rectify that decision. But it was one of those things where they had to make a hard line of, we can't go over this amount because we just flat out can't afford it. They were in such a cap crunch that now Jordan Whitehead coming back, that is a huge boost to a position that has struggled mightily over the last 2 years. Antoine has been Antoine. That's been fine. It's been the other safety. And it's been the issues there. Ryan Neal last year was, to put it nicely, he was bad. And then, yeah, you have Carlton Davis leave. You have Jamel Dean there. You have Zion McCollum, who stepped up in a big way for the Buccaneers last year, filling in for both Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis during some injuries. They even bounced Zion around to safety in the playoffs because of the struggles of Ryan Neal. So you have your two outside corners there. Where it gets interesting is you take a look at the slot corner position. They brought Bryce Hall over from New York for some depth on the outside, but they signed Tavierre Thomas from the Houston Texans, and then they draft Georgia safety Tyke Smith. And Tyke Smith took, I think it was something over like 96% of his collegiate snaps, even though he was listed as a safety, was at slot corner. So now you have a major slot corner position battle between Tavierre Thomas, Tyke Smith, and then Christian Izien, who was their starter last year, who went undrafted out of Rutgers, and he played a pivotal role for the Bucs in quite a few games. And in week one, kind of set the tone with a key interception in the first half, where he just straight up stole the ball away and created an opportunity for the Buccaneers. So the secondary, there's a little hesitation there because Carlton Davis is gone, but the way Zion McCollum played last year, and if Jamel Dean can get himself back on track, you throw in Jordan Whitehead, you throw in some of these free agents and the addition of Tyke Smith, and this secondary might surprise some people.
Now, you mentioned the draft with Tyke Smith. I want to dive a little bit, James, into Tampa's overall draft class. Obviously, they beef up the offensive line in the first round, and they add a couple of really nice pieces throughout the rest. How'd you think Tampa did?
They hit every need that they had. Yeah, I talked a lot on the show leading up to the draft. They had to address the interior offensive line. They had to address edge rusher. Those were the two big ones, and they did that with their first two picks. Graham Barton in the first round, Chris Braswell in the second round. And Braswell was a guy that had a lot of buzz early in the draft process and started to fizzle. And you saw guys like Chop Robinson start to get a little bit more buzz and be in that conversation a little bit more. But Braswell's a guy that has some really impressive games and would have had more of an opportunity if he had left Alabama. But instead, he basically committed to Alabama. He was going to stay there, and it kind of shows the character that he has. And the Buccaneers are real big on drafting people in addition to football players, because they were bit in the butt a little bit early on in Jason Light's tenure, where they were drafting really great football players, but not some of the best people. And so they've really found that kind of happy marriage. And so Braswell, I think, is really going to help out this team after having lost Shaq Barrett and some of the struggles they had in the pass rush. And then you take a look at who I think might be one of the biggest steals in the draft, and that's Washington wide receiver Jalen McMillan. This was a guy who, on one of the most electric college offenses, was a huge part. And when he was out with injury during last season, you could see a little bit of the struggles that Washington had. And it got to the point that one of his teammates went up to him and said, look, you really need to sit out because we need you down the stretch. And he kept trying to return from injury too early. And it was causing problems in his ability to produce and really be himself. So they finally had to sit him down and say, look, take a step back. We're going to be fine right now. We need you in December and January. So if he had been healthy, I think we're talking about a guy that probably goes towards the top of day 2 rather at the very end of day 2. And the Bucs really might have found themselves a huge steal, and potentially, not to put this out in the universe, potentially a Chris Godwin replacement if he leaves in free agency next year.
Wow, yeah, insurance policies can be that way, where they can contribute with the guys, but then the guy leaves, and then all of a sudden, guy just steps up and slots into that role. So they added a lot of depth throughout the draft, but it's not just the draft where you can add now. Free agency is still going on. There are still other roster holes that every team has. Where do you think Tampa could add to their roster, or do you think they're pretty much set heading into training camp in a couple months?
I think really they're pretty much set. There may be a move or two. We see those, kind of those late surges in free agency when players start getting cut. So you can see a couple of the changes, down the line. And of course, if somebody goes down in training camp, you hope that doesn't happen. But of course, there are still some pretty solid players out there. But right now, I think they're happy with where they are. They've filled in a lot of the depth. They filled in some starting positions, especially on that offensive line with Graham Barton and then Sua Opeta coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles to potentially play that starting left guard position. I think at this point in time, you're just going to see a lot of battles in camp, and hopefully an improvement between some of the player additions and of course the new offensive coordinator and Liam Cohen. So I wouldn't expect many, if any, moves outside of Tristan Wirfs getting an extension, and a very, very big one sooner than later.
James is great, and for more on James, visit him over at the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on Locked On NFL in the final part of the show, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants will join us to talk about Daniel Jones, if he's on track for week 1, and a lot more. Stay tuned. Plenty to get to on Locked On NFL. First, the show is brought to you by Game Time, and I'm super excited personally for the NBA Finals. I'm a big NBA guy, and it'd be awesome to go to an NBA Finals game at some point in my life. Now, Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Now, the Finals, it's looking right now like it's going to be Celtics, Mavericks, both teams up 3-0 on their respective opponents in the conference finals right now. I'd love to go to any of those games. For me, though, personally, closeout games would be, if I had to pick one, that'd be the one that I would go to. So over on Game Time, they have options for NBA Finals tickets, and they have a bunch of good deals. Plus, the Game Time app has so many amazing features. Now, my favorite is definitely last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. But obviously, the Game Time app has so many other things that make it so unique and so easy to use, like flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Game Time ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time with last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back, our final segment of Locked On NFL. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here. We've talked about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, talked about Antoine Winfield Jr. and the Buccaneers. Now we're going to get into Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants will join us. Big year for Daniel Jones upcoming. Will he deliver? Let's talk about it now. The New York Giants are hoping to have Daniel Jones back for week 1 of the 2024 season, but he is still in recovery mode. But is he on track? Here to talk about that with me is Patricia Traina, the host of Locked On Giants. And Patricia, I know it's been an interesting offseason for the Giants here. The draft just a couple of weeks ago, they add some offensive talent to surround Daniel Jones with. But obviously the big storyline is, will Daniel Jones even be ready to play come week 1? Now, Daniel Jones has been pretty confident, saying that he should at least be on track, but we're not going to know until he's out there on the field in that week 1 game. But based off of what you've seen, what you've heard, and your overall inklings, do you feel like he actually is on track, or do you think there might be a little more to the story?
Yeah, I think he is on track. You know, he was at he's been at the OTAs, but thus far they have limited him as to what he has been able to do. So they've limited him basically to individuals working against air and doing 7-on-7s. He has not done any teamwork yet. Now, obviously, in fairness to him, they didn't start doing teamwork until phase 3, which began last Monday. So they're holding him out because, you know, there's always that concern that even though it's padless and no contact, there's always that concern that when you have 22 bodies on the field, that somebody might fall the wrong way and roll into the quarterback and stuff like that. So they don't want to take any chances. But that being said, Daniel Jones spoke about being confident to be ready for the starter training camp, which is going to be, I think, July 24th for the Giants. I know it's going to be late July, and he is definitely confident in being ready for week 1. But as you said, you know, they're taking it a little by little, step by step. And so far, so good. No setbacks. He's looked like he's moving well and whatnot, but obviously working at the slower tempo that they are now versus what they will have to do in the preseason and the regular season, 2 totally different animals. So we're kind of a wait and see mode.
Yeah, it is a shift. So for Daniel Jones, obviously he has to respond to everything and continue to get through those thresholds. But when he is back, Patricia, whether it is week 1, whether it's a little later down the line, what are your expectations for him this season? It feels like we've talked about make or break years, you and I, in the past for him, but what does this year mean for Daniel Jones for the Giants?
Yeah, it's a make or break year for him, simply put. I mean, he's in year 2 of that contract. There is the escape hatch. You know, the Daniel Jones detractors will say that every excuse in the book has been made for him. And, you know, you can probably make that argument. Although last year, you know, injuries hit. He didn't have Andrew Thomas. He didn't have Saquon Barkley for a few games. He didn't have Darren Waller for a few games. Just everything went off the rails. But in what lifetime is everything around you perfect? You know, the good quarterbacks, the good athletes, they find a way to overcome the little unexpected things. And Daniel Jones, you know, last year really had 2 solid quarters of football, those being the second half of that week 2 game against the Arizona Cardinals, in which, you know, he brought them back from like a 20-0 deficit to win that game. Other than that, he's just, you know, he's regressed. You know, it's the same problems with him. The slow processing time, the deer in the headlights look. Daniel Jones, you know, and I'm not excusing the offensive line, which was putrid last year, but at some point, you know, you got to pull up your bootstraps and you got to say, okay, you know what? I've got to take this on me and I've got to do what I can. And the injury history, that's not helping him either. Let's be real. If he gets hurt again, you know, that's pretty much probably going to be it for him, depending on the injury, because he does have that injury guarantee in his contract. And, you know, the Giants, they're going to probably run with him for as long as they can. But if the season starts to tank early, my guess is they will pull him, similar to what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson last year and what the Raiders did with Derek Carr the year prior, because of that injury guarantee that Daniel Jones has in his contract.
Yeah, the inconsistencies have certainly been there, but also I think, Patricia, the weapons around him, especially in the wide receiver position, it's been questionable at times. And the Giants go out there in the draft, they get Malik Neighbors with their first round pick. How do you think the Giants did in the draft? And do you think Neighbors was the right selection based off how those first few picks fell?
Yeah, I like the picks. I really do. I like the entire draft class, good value, guys that I think that can help them in various ways. Regarding the Malik Neighbors pick, I thought that was kind of interesting. I was beating the drum for Roma Dunze, but with Malik Neighbors, I think that what the Giants can do is they can pretty much build their offense the way they wanted to build it last year, but weren't able to. So, when Malik Neighbors, you got a guy who can find the soft spots in zone coverage, a guy who's got great vision, who can take a ball and turn, a 6-yard pass into a 20-yard gain, a guy who can draw double coverage, a guy you can move around. This isn't something that they've had since Odell Beckham Jr. So now they've got a legitimate playmaker on the offense, on the passing game, which really hasn't been, explosive. The Giants were ranked last in explosive plays. So, look, you can only lean on your defense so much. And while the Giants defense is going to be a lot better this year, I think the offense has to do its part. And it just hasn't been able to do so because it hasn't really had anybody other than maybe Saquon Barkley, who's not even here anymore, to keep opposing defensive coordinators up at night.
And speaking of free agency, obviously Saquon Barkley is one of the major stories flipping from the Giants to the Eagles, but it's not over, Patricia. We still have a couple months to go before the season. Obviously, the first couple waves are now done. We're post-draft, but do you think the Giants could make any other additions to any other spots on their roster? Do you think they're pretty much set heading into training camp?
I think right now, if they make any changes to the roster, it's probably going to be the bottom of the roster. They always tend to, crank out different guys, swap different guys out. So I think any kind of injuries or anything like that, they should be set. Now, if it were up to me, there's probably a couple of positions I would look to add, one of which would be cornerback. I know they have said that they have confidence in Cordell Flott to start opposite of Deonte Banks, but what people aren't talking about is the fact that they tried to sign two more experienced cornerbacks, Tre'Davious White and Darius Williams, earlier in the offseason, only to come up short. So, now they're saying, oh, we've got confidence in Cordell Flott. So then why were you trying to sign these other two guys if you have such confidence in him? Now, that's not to say that Flott won't be good. The concern with Flott is he's still a young player. He's actually younger than some of the rookies that they have on the team, believe it or not.
Wow.
And B, Cordell Flott, he's so slender, can he hold up to the rigors of the position? And look, last year, the Giants tried to play young talent at the cornerback positions, and that didn't really pan out. Now, all of a sudden, they had to scramble and put back veterans. So I'd like to see them maybe add one more veteran at the cornerback spot, even if it's on a veteran minimum deal, just in case something happens.
And you and we talked about it a little bit before we hit record here, Patricia, but the NFL offseason seems to never actually end, even though we do have some dead periods here and there. And part of that is the NFL schedule release, where a couple of years ago, no one was really talking about it. Now it's this whole nightly event that is a huge deal. There are a bunch of things that can go into a schedule in terms of where a bye week is located, home stands, road trips, primetime games lined up next to each other. How do you think the Giants did? And are there any spots on that schedule that intrigue you?
Yeah, I mean, they had the bye week at week 11, which is kind of sort of in the middle, not too bad. So you're talking the third week or just the second week, I should say, of November, really. The stretch of the schedule that I'm a little concerned with, or I should say interested in, is weeks 3 through 8. That's when they start playing the really good teams on the schedule. And they have, Cleveland at 1:00 on week 3. Then they turn around. They've got Dallas on a Thursday night game. Then they got to go out to Seattle. Then they've got Cincinnati, I think it's on a Monday night game. Then the Eagles come to town. Then it's Pittsburgh on a Monday night game. So that's a very interesting stretch, that week 3 to week 8. And I apologize. The Bengals game, I think, is Sunday night. It's not Monday night. The Pittsburgh game, I believe, is Monday night. So that's an interesting stretch. And, it's important for the Giants, I think, to start off 2-0, because once they get into that stretch, how they do is pretty much going to define their season, I think.
Patricia is incredible. And for more on Patricia's work, check her out over at the Locked On Giants podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On NFL. Thank you again for tuning in, listening, watching, however you're consuming our content. We really appreciate it. Be sure to subscribe and follow along wherever you do like to consume Locked On NFL. Coming up tomorrow, we'll have more NFL content, of course, with your Tuesday host. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On NFL.